Hannah, can you also say something so we can just make sure that your audio is also working?
Can you hear me?
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So we'll still give it another 2-3 minutes so that the participants can come back, and then we'll get started right away. So how are you today?
Is that directed at me or just anyone?
Yeah, we started the meeting at like 12:30, and we had like 30 minutes just to prep some of our volunteers. And then from 1 o'clock, we had our first round, and then that ended. And then we had our second round, or relay round, and now they get like a 15-20 minute break. Then we have the speakers, and then it's the award ceremony. You and Bonnie, you guys can stay for the award ceremony if you just want to like see some of the winners, or you can head out once you're done. Either way works.
Okay. I'll definitely say for the first part of it, I do like award ceremonies.
Yeah.
So do they know who won, or are they going to be not paying attention to us and waiting to figure out who did win?
Um, so actually what we did is there is like a live scoreboard that's on our website, but we took it down. We wanted to build the suspense, so we actually took that down. So yeah, they'll only know who won once speaker event during the award ceremonies. So
Okay. So Hannah, you're going to have some pop quiz questions for them, like tiebreakers. Just
I did not prepare for that, but we can come up with them on the fly if needed.
yeah, so just to reiterate, Hannah will go first, and then Bonnie will go. For this one, we don't really have like a Q&A session like specifically. So it's just if participants have questions, they can throw it in the chat, and then you guys just either someone will read the question, you guys can answer, or if you can just see it, you guys can just answer it. Because I know sometimes when you're sharing screens, you can't pull up the chat and get really confusing. So that's why we'll have someone either read it, or if you can see it.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see it. So if you could just let me know if there are any questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll let you know once it's all done. Once you're done speaking, then we can talk about that. Okay, is everyone back? If you are back, just put either like a thumbs up or a yes in the chat so that we can get started soon. If you guys also know your teammates, just send out a message that we're gonna get started. So all right, so we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Risha Narayanan, and I am the panelist director for the inteGIRLS Detroit chapter. I am very pleased to welcome you all to today's event and to have a chance to introduce our first guest speaker, Hannah Wilder. Hannah is a manager on the marketing science team at Domino's. Her team may be small, but they tackle big problems, advising on decisions regarding where to spend marketing dollars and optimal ways to set pricing in Domino's stores. Hannah's background is in computer science and statistics, and she is currently finishing up her master's in computer science at the University of Illinois. In addition to school and work, Hannah is passionate about contributing to STEM opportunities and education for all through her leadership role on the Women in STEM at Domino's Community Outreach Committee. So Hannah is also part of a volunteer-led group called Women in STEM at Domino's, or WISDOM for short. WISDOM's mission is to attract, retain, and develop women in STEM careers and is open to all full-time Domino's employees. And of course, she also loves a good pepperoni pizza with extra cheese. Please welcome Hannah.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Risa. I am happy to be here today, and WISDOM, Women in STEM at Domino's, is very happy and very honored to sponsor this event today. We love what you guys are doing, and we're really excited about it, so we're glad that we can contribute. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about WISDOM and then also a little bit about myself. So I'm going to put on my WISDOM hat to start. So as Risha mentioned, I am the Community Outreach Co-Chair, or one of the Community Outreach Co-Chairs of WISDOM. And so our organization is really about how do we increase representation at Domino's? How do we increase representation, not just among people of different genders, but kind of across all of the different dimensions that make us unique. And so for us, today is very important because we want to make sure that we're getting the best STEM talent and the next generation of STEM talent to consider Domino's as someplace that you might want to work someday. So for us, it's about how can we build the business by getting in more representative talent from kind of like across the spectrum and use that talent to come up with more diverse ideas, which will lead to better outcomes and ultimately better growth for our business. And that's great for the business, but it's also good for us as individuals because we have better talent with better ideas. That means that we have growth in our business, which creates opportunities, not only for those of us who are there now, but for all of the people that we hope will join us. So today is really important for us because we get to meet you guys and we get to talk about how we would like you guys to come work for us someday, and hopefully you will. So a little bit about WISDOM. We provide a wide range of benefits to our members. So we have leadership opportunities where you can join a committee, run a committee, or even just run WISDOM. And that's a great opportunity to practice your leadership skills, but also to get a chance to interact with other leaders in the business. So we get the opportunity to talk directly to our leadership, from VPs to our C-suite members and CEO, about what is important to us as WISDOM members, but also as employees. And that's a really great chance for us to kind of promote our mission and get them on board to help us out. We also have a lot of events that promote practice in either public speaking or various training opportunities. So for example, this is a great opportunity or example of an opportunity for public speaking practice. I'm here today, but we have a lot of other people who contribute to our community outreach events and get the same kind of chance to talk to people just like you and share their passion for STEM and for Domino's. We also run training programs. So if you want to learn more about something, we run training programs for soft skills, but also more technical skills like database programming, for example, is one we recently run, or Six Sigma, which is a process improvement methodology that we have experts internally, and they kind of teach everybody else what they've learned. So overall, we think that WISDOM gives a really great opportunity to all of our members. And we've been up to a lot of cool things lately. So we've been converting our school visit program that we usually do throughout the year to a virtual format, since with COVID, it's not really safe for us to be going into the schools right now. We also have a virtual Breakfast with Leaders series where we have the opportunity for about 8 to 10 of our members to meet directly with one of our VPs or leadership team members. The last guest there was actually our COO, Russell, and I was able to be a part of that and talk to him about kind of like what has made him successful and get to know him a little bit better. So those are all of these really great opportunities for our members. In addition to that, one of our most popular events of the year is the annual Women Leaders Panel, where we bring in women from our leadership team, talk about some of their challenges and some of their successes, and really talk to us about what has made them successful and how they've gotten to where they are today. So sort of similar to what you guys are doing now, but internal to Domino's. So really, this is my pitch for you guys to keep us in mind. So when you're graduating from college, when you're in college, when you're thinking about where you might want to go and do an internship or where you might want to get a full-time job, please think of us. We'd love to have you guys join us. We're always looking for the new smart minds to come up with the next great idea. So we'd love for you to join us. So taking off my wisdom hat, putting on my normal day-to-day hat, as Risha mentioned, I am a manager of marketing science at Domino's. So marketing science is kind of a little bit of an ambiguous word. That might not be something that a lot of you have heard of, but in simple terms, it's sort of data science applied specifically to marketing. So we look at problems specifically around the marketing realm of how do we convince more people that they want to buy our pizza? How do we do that efficiently? How do we spend the dollars and the budget that's been allocated to us in the best way? We also think about things like promotions. So what kind of coupons should we offer? How much should our pizzas cost? And those kind of questions. My team specifically, as Risha mentioned, is a small team. So I have 2 people who work under me, and they work on media budget allocation. So where do we spend our dollars? Do we spend more on TV or more on YouTube or Facebook? And what time should we be spending those dollars? Should we spend them on a Monday or a Friday, in the morning or in the afternoon? And all those are questions that we think about and bring answers back to the business on, like, hey, here's what we think you guys should be doing. In addition to that, my other team member works on pricing. So we work on how we best price our products so that they're affordable to customers, but also so that our many franchisees can make a profit. So we're trying to balance both of those 2 parties to make sure that everyone gets the value out of the product. So for that, I, on my day-to-day basis, use a programming language called R, which some of you may have heard of. That's pretty common in data science. Also, SQL Server is another technology that I use. So I spend a lot of my day writing SQL queries, which is an interface to database technology that allows me to pull data out of our data stores and pull it together into summaries and reports and let people know what's going on. And then lastly, PowerPoint, which I know doesn't sound fancy or cool, but that's actually one of the most important parts of my job because I use that to communicate my findings out to everyone else. And that part is really important because if you don't communicate your findings and your recommendations, no one's ever going to take any action on them. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and how I got to where I am today, but I wanted to start with why I'm here, like actually here today. So for me, this has been kind of a long journey. I have not always been the kind of person who wants to talk in front of people, but I've come to the realization that this is very important, and that's why I'm taking some time out of my day to do it. So for me, I've had kind of a little bit of a journey here, I'll say. So I actually was lucky enough to get a scholarship from an organization called the Michigan Council of Women in Technology Foundation, which some of you may have heard of. If you haven't, I would encourage you to check out their website. They run a lot of great camps and programs for web development and other technologies, including robotics, to women and female students who are interested in, and I'm sure non-binary as well, students who are interested in getting into technology. And that's really what they're supporting. So they offered me a scholarship. I was very lucky to be kind of like brought into that part of the organization in terms of them supporting me getting through my undergraduate career. And then another one was I had a freshman computer science professor named Dr. Ott, who was a part of the National Center for Women in Information Technology. And she did a really great job of bringing in women to the field and mentoring us and making sure that we stayed. Because what she found is a lot of times people didn't make it through freshman year. So you start out freshman year with many women in computer science, but not very many of them would graduate. And so what she started doing was pairing freshmen with alumni. So every freshman, when they go through our CS1000 class during their freshman year, gets an alumni email, and you email back and forth with the alumni and ask them questions about where they, how they got to where they are today and what it is that kind of like got them through that and what challenges that they've had. And that was really good for me when I was a freshman. I felt that that really answered some of the questions that I had about like, where am I going with this? What can I do with this? And so I am lucky enough to have since transitioned from, freshman to alumni. So now every fall I have a freshman that I'm communicating with, talking to about computer science. And that's been really special to me. And it's something that I really enjoy. So from there, once I got to Domino's, a couple years after I started, I got into Women in STEM at Domino's and was able to join the community outreach committee. And that has also been really special to me because I've gotten to talk to a lot of students, younger than you, older than you, about STEM, how it looks at Domino's, and kind of like the variety of careers that you can get into with a STEM degree. And so that has been something that I really enjoyed. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here today, because I discovered that that was something that I really enjoyed in a way that I could give back. So how did I get here in the larger scheme of things? I was lucky enough to have a program called Science Olympiad, which again, some of you might have heard of. It's a science program where you study really hard or you build things for about 3 months, so usually between December and March, and then you go to competitions after that to win medals. I always liked the shiny stuff, so medals were a fun part for me. But biology, chemistry, physics, earth science, engineering, whatever your passion was. I did earth science, but I loved it. It gave me a chance to kind of like learn things outside of school, so like new things that I'd never seen before. I built binders, I built note sheets. I also kind of got my first foray into computer science. I built an astronomy calculator for astronomy, and it was not fancy programming. It was not what I would consider, you know, like good today. It was not very complicated, but it was fun and it was useful. And I liked that I had built something by myself that I could use. Like I'd improved the process in some way, and that was really valuable for me. So my whole family was into it. This is a picture of my dad and my sister down here. My mom's not in there, but she was behind the camera. They spent a lot of time driving us around to various events and competitions and driving us to practice and weekends and evenings. I really appreciated that they made that investment in me. In addition to that, I also met the guy who would eventually be my husband. So we did science out together from 6th grade to when I graduated in high school in 12th grade. And there's a picture of us 10 years later. So that was also, you know, something that I got out of science though that I still really appreciate today. So in addition to Science or Science Olympiad, I studied statistics in high school. And so I took an initial statistics class. I thought it was kind of cool. It's a different kind of math. It's not like what you learn kind of like growing up until that point. It was very different. And I liked the different perspective that they had, this idea that you could quantify the amount of kind of error, the amount of uncertainty in a number. I thought that was really cool. And so I took more statistics classes. I ended up taking 3 statistics classes in high school. And then I also went to summer youth programs at Michigan Tech, specifically women in engineering, when I was in 9th grade. And that for me was because in high school, I really liked math and science. And so people were like, oh, you like math and science, you should be an engineer. Like, okay, like maybe, sure. So I went to the women in engineering camp at Michigan Tech. And what I learned that I didn't want to be an engineer. So that was not for me. Check that one off my list. But the point is, it was a good learning experience for me, and it taught me something about myself. I also had the opportunity to take a programming class in high school, which was in Visual Basic, which for those of you not familiar with it, is more of a graphical computer science language. So most of the code that you're writing is directly linked to some sort of user interface. So you make a button, you click the button does the thing or something. And that is what I built the astronomy calculator in. So that was kind of my first introduction to computer science. It wasn't very deep because the teacher that I had was a web development teacher. And so like the sort of lower level programming constructs that I would learn about in my freshman classes, I was not familiar with. So I went into my freshman year of undergrad kind of knowing about programming, like having some idea of what that meant, but not being like deeply good at it or anything. It wasn't something that I'd spent a lot of time on. It was just something that I kind of got introduced to and thought I might like. So why did I end up in STEM at all? So I told you a little bit about statistics. For me, that was about kind of like the measurement. I thought it was really cool that you could measure things and like learn something by just calculating numbers and doing math. That was really interesting to me. And I liked the idea that you could kind of build new knowledge from that math. Like you could use math to acquire new knowledge. I also wanted to automate it though, because a lot of statistics, especially when you're doing the early stages, is very repetitive. So you do the same thing a lot of times, like the math equations are all the same, and really you just need to do the math to get the result. So I'm like, well, I don't really want to do all that myself. Like if I could just teach a computer to do it, then that would be great because I could do that and then I could do kind of like the new fun stuff myself without having to do the same thing over and over again. And so what that ended up being was the measurement part was in statistics, because statistics is sort of the science of measurement. So it's how do you measure things? How should you measure things? What can the measurements actually tell you? And then the automation part was computer science, because I really wanted to know how to do my work faster. I knew that, maybe I could go talk to somebody and like they could do it. They could maybe write me a program or something, but I really wanted to do it myself. I really wanted to learn how to do it for myself so I wouldn't have to rely on anybody else. And that was why I wanted to do computer science. So the learning part, I thought maybe like sticking these two things together, maybe that would be data science. Data science was pretty like young at that point in terms of there weren't really programs in data science at that point. So what I did was I did computer science and I did statistics, and I decided I'd stick them together and like in the middle somewhere I'd end up in data science maybe. at the time, I didn't realize that there were other options kind of in that intersection. So there's data science, but there's also things like data visualization or data journalism, what they call business intelligence, which is kind of more on the reporting side. So it's creating a product that is like giving people the data, the information, as opposed to trying to build something else on top of the information. So I went to Michigan Tech, which for those of you who don't know is like way up in the UP, so up in the Upper Peninsula where the star is up here. Something like 8.5 or 9 hours from where we are, pretty far. But I loved it up there. There was a lot of snow, which I always thought was really fun. And I took a lot of math classes, a lot of math and statistics classes, and a lot of computer science classes, since those were my majors. So I double majored in statistics and computer science. I also took some art and graphic design classes because that was kind of a hobby for me. So, you know, that wasn't something I was going to do full time, but in high school and in middle school, I actually did really enjoy art. So I took a little bit of my time, like kind of my extra requirements that I had to do for general education. I took some art classes. I also took humanities, since those are kind of usually required in your gen ed. So stuff like language arts and history kind of classes. And at the time, I did not appreciate those. I thought those were kind of just like, oh yeah, I'll just get through them. Like these aren't going to be important to me later in life. But as it turns out, they were. So when you have to take those English language arts classes or history classes, even if they're not kind of like totally aligned with your interests, it's really important that you take everything you can from those, because they'll make you more well-rounded and they'll make you a better communicator. And that's really important to your future career in terms of you being able to explain to people what it is that you learned from your technical skills. Because communicating to non-technical people the results of technical things, that's the hard part. There's a lot of people who can learn the technical stuff, but there is a much smaller set of people who can or are willing to learn that communication piece. And so that's something that I would suggest that you focus on and pay attention to if this is the field that you're interested in going into, because that's just very invaluable and it's pretty rare. So that was my undergraduate career. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do something in statistics and computer science, but I didn't know if it was going to be statistics or computer science, and I didn't know how they were going to play together. So I kind of just tried a lot of things. Checked a lot of things off my list. Like I said, I already kind of knew I didn't want to do engineering, so that one was off. I tried women in computing sciences my freshman year. That didn't really stick. At the time, I hadn't quite gotten to the point where I was like, this is something that I want to invest time in. For me, I was definitely one of the few women in my computer science degree, for sure. I had many classes where I was the only woman. But that to me, I didn't want that to be something that I spent more time thinking about. I was like, I know that I'm the only woman, I pretty much got that. I would really rather focus on I'm not going to be a woman in computer science. I'm going to be really good at computer science. I didn't want to focus too much on the fact that I was a woman, because that made me feel like I didn't belong there. So I was like, okay, no women in computing sciences for me. I also tried Bonsai Brawl, which was a game design competition they'd set up. So we had a bunch of the younger students would actually code together a gaming framework, and then they'd open it up and hold a competition for everybody. I did not like gaming. That was not my thing. I didn't like video games. I didn't really want to code for them, as it turned out. I did get to do the art for them. So I designed the logo for that year, because that year's theme was ducks. And that was kind of how I used my side hobbies there. But that was also not a good fit for me. So check that one off, not that one either. I also tried this thing called IT Oxygen, which was they call it an enterprise, but it's more like a small business run by students, and they built software. And that was also not a really good fit for me. I didn't really want to build software. I wanted to code, but I didn't want to build software. So that ended up not being where I wanted to go. I also from that learned that Silicon Valley was not probably someplace that I wanted to go, because I wasn't really passionate about the coding piece. I was more passionate about what you could do with it. And then I also worked in the Department of Computer Science office briefly, which was good for my communication skills, and it also helped me build relationships throughout the department, just in terms of getting to know the professors and getting to know the advisors and the people who worked in the office. So if you ever have the opportunity to work in an office job like that, it's really good for building relationships and kind of getting you a little bit more in touch with the department. I was also an orientation team leader briefly. I really did want to build up my leadership cred, because I thought it'd be good for my resume. So I'm like, all right, I'll be an orientation team leader. They were all organized by major, so I was one of the orientation team leaders for computer science. That was actually really hard, because I ended up being the leader for a team of about 20 freshman boys. And that was a big challenge, because they were freshmen, and Freshmen are not always super contained, especially when they're going through orientation. There's a lot of energy flying all over the place. And I hadn't kind of like built up my confidence as a leader yet. Like that wasn't something that was kind of like core to who I was. I was just kind of trying it out. And they walked all over me for sure. I did not have good control of that group, and it is not something that I would consider one of my more successful jobs. But I did learn a lot from it in terms of like what skills I needed to work on in order to become the leader that I wanted to be. So the next thing I did was I worked as a tutor in the Math Learning Center, which is where students come to get help with math on like kind of all their basic courses. Like we help them through homework, help them kind of like figure out the concepts they didn't quite get in class. And I loved that. That was super fun for me. I worked there for 3 years, and I ended up getting the opportunity to lead it as the hiring communications executive my senior year. And so that was a really good experience for me in terms of like, how do I kind of like lead people? How do I organize things? How do I keep track of stuff when like a lot of things flying around? And so that was where I ended up staying. I also did an internship at Domino in software engineering. Not really important what they do, but I did software engineering there, and that it was fun, but it wasn't something I wanted to do full time. Like software engineering, again, was not really my thing. I didn't want to just build software. So the next thing I tried was I did an internship at Domino's, actually in their finance department. I was working on finance analytics and finance data. And that I loved. I also loved that. I liked the people that I worked with. I thought the job was really cool. And I have also always loved pizza. So that was actually a great fit for me. So my point is, sometimes you just got to try out a lot of things, and you're not always going to like all of them. You may feel like you're not good at all of them, and that's okay, because all of these different pieces of things you try is an additional piece of data. It's something else that, you've learned about yourself. So either, hey, I like that, that's fun, like we should do more of that, or, that's probably not for me, or I'm probably not ready for that yet. And that's fine, because that's an additional piece of information you have about yourself. So those are the two things that really ended up sticking for me. So I had a lot of challenges throughout undergrad that I kind of had to like overcome and figure out, but the two main ones that kind of stick out in my brain are imposter syndrome and not really being sure of what I wanted to do in my career. So I'm sure that most of you have heard of imposter syndrome, but real quick, if you haven't heard of it before, it's kind of that feeling like you got lucky or you don't really belong there. Like, you just you fell backwards into it, and like you're there, but maybe you don't quite belong, and you never really feel comfortable that like you are a computer scientist or you are a statistician or a biologist. Like you don't feel like you're quite good enough to be there with everybody else. So that was a big challenge for me. So it took me a while to kind of like recognize the things that kind of like underpinned that for me. But one of them was when I was a freshman, all computer scientists, they love to talk, and a lot of them like to use really big words. Everybody's got their own set of big words, but it took me a while to recognize that like they were using big words, but it didn't mean that they were just like smarter than me. It just meant that they had a very specific area of expertise that I didn't have yet. So for example, computer science breaks down into all these little tiny fields, so people are experts in networks or programming or languages or databases, and each of them come with their own specific language. So it took me a while to realize that what I was hearing was like their specific knowledge. It didn't mean that I didn't know anything or that I didn't know enough. It just meant that I didn't know the same things that they did. And I needed to get okay with that. The other thing was not forcing myself into the stereotype. So like I said, I didn't like video games. I didn't really like programming even. I liked what you could do with programming, but I didn't really like the programming. And that always made me feel like I'm not a real computer scientist. Like, I'm just here like learning this stuff, but I don't really belong here. And so for a while, I was trying to kind of like fit myself into that stereotype. I'm like, all right, well, I can like be a little more antisocial. I can fit that stereotype at least, even if I don't like video games. But that wasn't the right thing to do for me. And it's not the right thing to do just in general, because it's not like, it's really like there's value in being different. There's value in being kind of the outlier and being unique in that sense. In being a woman or in being someone who doesn't like video games but still works in computer science. And so you kind of have to find those places where being an outlier makes you more valuable. So for example, I started my assignments before they were due, which is something that a lot of the super smart computer scientists who came in with like tons and tons of experience as a freshman didn't do. They didn't always study really hard either because they felt like they already knew it. So I understood the theory a lot deeper than a lot of them did because I had to work at it and I had to work really hard at it. The other thing is just building relationships. So like, like, you know, you're not gonna be friends with everybody, obviously, but like watching for those people who you can make friendships with. I went to office hours a lot and made friends with some of my professors who I still talk to this day. And just like knowing that you've got people on your side, kind of like cheerleader type people. Another thing is finding a leadership role that you can like be comfortable in, because that really helps build your confidence. On the kind of untitled career path side, so extracurriculars, I already talked about. Also going to career fairs and talking to recruiters helps you learn a lot about different companies and what's out there. Doing internships is great. One of the things that I struggled with the most was I'd get to the first exams of the semester, almost without fail, every single semester, and I'd have this just like feeling of dread. I'd just be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to fail my exams. Like, I don't think I'm in the right major. Like, what am I doing with my life? And I realized that happened every single semester consistently. And so sometime end of sophomore year, I realized that was happening. And I'm like, every single time, that's a little weird. And so I came up with a name for it. I call it the mid-semester major crisis. Reliably, every single time before exams, I'd freak out and be like, okay, like, calm down. This is the mid-semester major crisis. I knew it was coming. It's like, we're just going to muscle through it. I'm going to get through my exams and everything will settle down again. So I've seen that happen to a lot of people. A lot of people I've talked to about this. That tends to happen. So it might happen to you. If it happens, like, don't freak out. It's going to be okay. It's just the mid-semester major crisis. Then you can just see it coming and prepare for it. The other thing is realizing you can change your decision. So you're not stuck with whatever career you choose. You can always change your mind. You can always change to something else. I know lots of people who've successfully changed to other careers throughout their lives and are very happy with it. So you're not stuck with that. And then also searching for the right place rather than the right job. So your job's going to change. It's not going to be the same. A lot of times it's not going to be what they told you it was going to be in the job description, because, you know, job descriptions are kind of fluid. So if you can look for someplace where you like the people, you like who you're working with, that'll be really good, because that means that you're going to be more happy where you are regardless of whatever your current job is. So it's something I'd suggest watching out for. A little over on time, so I'm going to speed through a couple of these. I got my first full-time at Domino's, and that was great. I've been there about 4 years, done a lot of stuff in a lot of different areas. Went to grad school, so I'm almost done with grad school, like 2 weeks away. I'm really excited about that. In computer science, but more in the data science area. So statistical modeling, some data engineering, which is how you get data from point A to point B, like those application areas. But really, I'm still dealing with those same challenges today. I've still got that all kind of like up in my head. And so now it's more about like knowing my strengths and like what is valuable about them. That's important to me, that I hold on to that, and like, I'm not going to be good at everything, and that is okay, but I'm good at these things, and these things are the things that like make me valuable. So don't compare yourself to others, compare yourself to you. So, you know, you're not going to be good at the same things as other people, obviously, but sometimes it's really tempting to like look at other people and say like, oh, I'm not as good as that person because I can't do X or I can't do Y. But you can do different things, and that's good, because if everybody could do all the same things, life would be really boring, and everybody, like, we would never get any creativity out of anybody. So think about yourself and how you've grown. Don't think about yourself in comparison to other people. Also, work-life balance. Everybody says it, but it's really important, and it was something that I really struggled with. Really, like, all through high school, all through college, all through the first, like, 3 years of my job. I became a manager, and I was, like, really worried that I wouldn't be able to separate those two things, because my job all of a sudden got bigger, but I didn't have more time. And so actually what I went to do is I went to see a counselor and talked to them about it, and was like, hey, I've got this like work-life balance problem that I'm just struggling with. I can't figure it out. And it was really good to have somebody else to talk to and kind of help me work through that and like put some pieces kind of back in the right places. And so, you know, you don't want to rely on work or school for all your self-worth, because that causes you to get burned out. Like, you put everything you've got into that and you don't have anything left over for kind of the rest of your life. In terms of being unsure of your career path, remember, you're not stuck, so you can always change. That's a big one. Also, it's okay to have a day job kind of while you're figuring out where you want to go. So everybody talks about like, oh, you know, I'm getting my dream job. Like, I'm going to wait for my dream job. That's fine. But also, it's fine to have a job that you just like, or a job that you just don't hate, while you're trying to figure out what exactly it is that you want to do. You don't have to feel guilty because you're not like in your dream job yet. You can also have hobbies. A hobby can be separate from your job. That's cool too. You can have a job that pays the bills and do your hobby on the side. Lastly, when I was at that breakfast with our CEO or our COO, he was talking about how like life is really about the journey, and you have to kind of do each phase of your life. So you have to do the learning phase where you're kind of like exploring and figuring things out and learning new things. And you don't want to shortchange that learning part, because when you get to the earning part, which is kind of like once you've figured out what you're doing and you're an expert at something, you want to have a broad enough knowledge that you can still change around once you're in that phase. You don't want to lock yourself into anything too early, because then you'll have to kind of like backtrack and go back again. So don't devalue the learning phase of your life when you're just kind of like picking up all those new knowledge and experiences. And also, you know, the return phase of your life really should be all the time, ideally. But remember to give back to other people, like once you're in a spot where you feel like you have the internal resources to do that. Last reminder, so if you don't take away anything else from today, what I want you to take away from today is that you don't have to be successful for all women or all non-binary people or all of another group that you belong to. You have to be successful for you. And whatever success is to you, that's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be anybody else's idea of success. You get to choose what success means to you, whether that means that it's going farther in your career, spending more time with your family, having a positive impact on the world. Maybe you just want to make a lot of money. That's okay too. Like, whatever it is that success means to you, that's a personal thing to you that you don't have to let anybody else influence. And so when you're thinking about what you want, kind of like, you know, from your life as you grow up, think about what success means to you and where you want to go with it, and follow that path, not for anybody else, but just for you. So the last thing I want to leave you with too is, if you've got a question, or if you just need an encouraging word, like you feel like you're stuck, or you just want somebody to talk to who's been through it, like, feel free to reach out to me. There's my personal email. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to talk to you, love talking to people. So for sure, drop me a line if that's something that you're interested in. And I just wanted to thank Risha and everybody else at inteGIRLS for giving me the chance to talk to you guys today, but also giving Wisdom the chance to sponsor your guys' math competition this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Before I introduce, if you stop sharing, there might be some participants who sent you a private question. I'm not.
Let's see. How do I stop sharing? Did I get it?
There should be like a red message at the top that says stop sharing.
Oh, there it is. Thanks, guys. I do know how to use technology, I promise. Okay, yes, let's see. Should I answer the private questions out loud?
Yeah, you just don't have
to. Okay. Yes, there was a private question about how you get involved in Domino's events. So I'd say email me first step, and we can talk about like what that would look like. I don't really know. We generally tend to work with inside Domino's employees, but we also love to get involved with outside organizations. So if there's anything that, you know, person who asked me this question is interested in partnering on, we would love to talk to you about that and figure out how we can get involved.
Okay. Maybe you could also put your email in the chat so everyone can access it.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Hannah, for your time with us today, walking us through your career path and introducing Wisdom and its objectives, and obviously the impacts that Wisdom has. Your presentation was very inspiring and entertaining. So again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Wisdom, for sponsoring our math competition this year. With great pleasure, I would like to welcome our next guest speaker, Dr. Bonnie Beresford, who is going to talk about her interests in data mining and her journey to becoming an industry-recognized human capital strategist. Bonnie is a self-proclaimed data geek. She loves nerdy puzzles and games like Sudoku, Nonograms, and Scrabble. In fact, she was even on a competitive bridge team in high school. Her career started in IT, where she discovered the joys of data mining. She also discovered that data mining with a purpose, like starting with a strong hypothesis or business question, helps you stay focused. Today, Bonnie is an industry-recognized human capital strategist, performance consultant, presenter, and author. She leads the learning and performance analytics practice at GP Strategies, a learning consultancy focused on workplace performance. With over 20 years of experience in the field, her hallmark is linking investments in people to measurable business outcomes. Her statistical business impact work has earned number learning industry awards. She has authored a book, Developing Human Capital, and numerous articles. Her article, So You Want to Measure Impact, Now What?, won an MVP award for measuring impact. Bonnie holds a PhD in Human Capital Management from Bellevue University and an MBA from Wayne State University. A member of the International Society for Performance Improvement, Bonnie actively served on both the Michigan and the international boards of directors. Please welcome Bonnie Beresford.
Well, that's quite an introduction. I think I should get to know that person. Hey, I want to thank everybody for sticking around and joining us with this session. And I know you're anxious to get to your rewards or the who won your math competition. So I do want to pick up on some of the comments that Hannah made. And first off, while she was ordering, I started to pull up, I have 2 monitors here, and I started to pull up the Domino's menu so I could order something when we're done, because she got me so excited about pizza. Hannah and I have some similarities. We have never met, but like Hannah, I am more into what the data can tell us than actually doing the programming. So I'm more of an applied STEM person than a roll up my sleeves and actually do the coding kind of thing. And I want to take you on that journey just so you can see how somebody who's been in the field well over 20 years, what have I done to find a niche for being somebody who likes data, and it didn't really resonate with other people. Like you're different. One of the companies I worked for called me the data lady. Okay, what do you do with that? Well, I'll take you on a little bit of a journey here. As was mentioned in the intro, I love bridge, and I didn't realize it at the time when I started playing in grade school that the game of bridge is very much a game of analysis. You are counting cards, you are hypothesizing about who has what, and it's just a fun thing. In high school, people would skip class and go to McDonald's or hang out in the parking lot. I had a group of friends, and we would skip class and hang out outside the principal's office playing bridge. We would skip classes, but they couldn't believe we were skipping class, because who would skip class to sit outside the principal's office and play bridge? So we did that. And I also was part of a bowling league. And here's where the geek really kicks in, because we did statistical process control on our bowling games. We did, if those of you are familiar with this, you're looking for your standard deviation if things are within range, your upper and lower control limits, and we had control charts for our bowling. This is not normal for a high school kid to be doing this, but I was bowling with people who ended up becoming engineers, which I did not, but we just jazzed with the numbers and what it could tell us. Today, I am an avid golfer, and yeah, I keep scoring my head because I'm just a numbers person. And I also am a Big Bang Theory fan. And I don't know if some of you are. To me, this is the show for us. If you haven't watched it, you should. And there's an episode called Fun with Flags. Well, yeah. I have a workshop that I do on how to write a good survey, because being able to write a good survey is actually part of being able to do a good analysis. If you have bad questions, the data isn't going to tell you what you want. So I have a survey workshop that I do called Fun with Surveys. So thank you, Sheldon and Amy. And finally, yeah, in my spare time, I always, like if I'm on an airplane or something, I always have a Sudoku book, because to me, playing with numbers is just relaxing. I wanted to focus not necessarily on where I started, but where I am right now, to show you what work in the field can look like. As was mentioned in the introduction, I am the Director of Performance and Learning Analytics for GP Strategies. GP Strategies is a learning and performance improvement consultancy. We have 5,000 employees around the world, helping Fortune 500 organizations improve their workforce through employee development. You might call that training, on-the-job training, adult training. And what in the world does somebody in a STEM kind of field have to do with that? Well, when we think about learning and performance analytics, first, what do we mean by learning? Learning could be for on the workplace, it could be going to a classroom training, it could be web-based, it could be Zoom conference calls like this, it could be informal learning. Organizations are investing millions and globally billions of dollars in employee training. You know what the biggest question they ask is it worth it? Is it improving performance? Can we translate that learning into on-the-job behavioral change for whatever the audience is, whether it's somebody in a healthcare setting, whether it's somebody in IT, whether it's somebody in a manufacturing or engineering capacity? Is it working? Can we say that our learning, the millions of dollars we're investing, is changing performance in a measurable way that's driving business results? You know what's behind all of this? Data. But you've got to know what to do with the data. So I'm going to take you on just a little example of how we approach this problem, taking this question of does it work and creating business results, so you can see how we apply the underlying data to making business decisions. Something else that Hannah said that was really important, she talked about her three big tools that she uses, R, SQL, and PowerPoint. That's the same in my camp, R, SQL, and PowerPoint. We also use a lot of Excel. And yes, we use Power BI and some other things for visualization, but generally it's those three, and the PowerPoint is essential. How do you tell your story? Hannah talked about communications, and that is important too, because you can come up with the right answer, but if you cannot communicate it in a way that non-technical people understand, it doesn't matter. You won't make your point. So this leadership development project is for first level leaders. That's the term we use for the frontline supervisor. And we wanted to know, what's the evidence? They had a leadership development program. It was costing them about $1.5 million a year to put people through this 15 modules of training, live and experiential. And was that $1.5 million worth it? Should they keep doing this program? Because there's a lot of other things you could do with $1.5 million. I mean, I know I could. Our approach then is to help quantify that connection by identifying leading indicators and business results. And we call this a measurement map. This process of measurement mapping is something I invented about 8 years ago because people could not figure out how to make this connection. You're going to see it's really a simple logic model. But a lot of people in the learning space and the human resources space are not as logically inclined as a lot of those in STEM are. I mean, we think cause and effect, this, then this. I mean, with numbers, with engineering, with scientific experiments, we're thinking logically in causal chain all the time. Believe it or not, that is a special skill. So we will say this organization wanted to improve profitability. And they defined that as, well, increasing revenue and decreasing cost. And we've got our Foundations of Leadership program. How in the world do I know if it's working? We get with the organization and have them define what working would look like. How in the world would a leader program contribute to profitability? And they said, well, we're teaching the leaders about safety. So the plant safety scores, this is this actually is a food processing company. So in the food processing plants, the safety scores matter. And so if I've got a good leader, they should be safer. And if we're safer, that's going to reduce injuries, which reduces cost. And if we're reducing cost and being safe and we're running things efficiently, the productivity of the plant goes up. And as we're able to produce more, then that would be increased profit. And if we have trained leaders, turnover should go down. When people leave an organization, there is a cost, and most companies know what that dollar cost is. So whether you are a first level supervisor or an IT programmer or a marketing person, they know the cost of turnover. And it's painful for an organization to have turnover because they have to go hire somebody else and train them. So if these are where we want to go, how would an individual leader contribute to that? So we back this down through this causal chain of evidence and say their employees should be engaged and we shouldn't have high turnover. If you've got minimum wage employees in an hourly job, they might not feel so engaged and may choose to go to work or not. That costs the company money. A supervisor who can engage them would have lower absenteeism, which is going to help the profitability. And similarly, if we're promoting supervisors and we have people ready in the pipeline when there's an opening, then we're hiring from within. People aren't leaving because they've got job opportunities. And you can see a couple other things here that the organization said, yeah, these are ways we could identify if our leaders are improving performance and contributing to the bottom line. Once we get the metrics and we have data in different systems behind all of this, and this is where some of that data engineering comes in because these metrics are all going to be in different systems. So you're going to have to go fishing and make friends with different data analysts across the country, or not across the country, across the company to be able to pull this. Once we pull it, we typically use something called an observational study, which is very much like a clinical drug trial, where you've got test and control groups. And we think right now of COVID and all the tests going on for a vaccine, where you've got people who are getting the drug and some getting the placebo, and we want to see if it makes a difference. The same thing happens here. Let's look at leaders who went through training versus those who did not go through training. Look at their before and after performance, see if there's a change over time. And we're going to control for these other factors. Maybe they're in a big plant or a little plant. And this is where the statistical modeling comes in. So what we're doing, we are really data geeks, digging through data, assembling different data sets, building hypotheses and building statistical models to test this and then to predict performance. What we discovered was a change in turnover. The first year there was 12.7, then 9.4. Could leadership development take the credit for this? Well, we split it. And we could see that the year two people, or in year two, the trained people had much lower turnover. This amounted to $2.3 million in savings in reduction in supervisor turnover. So just a quick question, how would you interpret this? Would you, what would this mean to you if you were in charge of the training program and you get this kind of result? You can just, anybody who wants to enter something into chat. I'll just say they were pretty excited. They did not know they were going to see this. They knew that they had dropped turnover from 12.7 to 9.4, but they didn't realize, oh my gosh, it actually had that kind of difference. Then we did something that we love to do, which is segment the data. And here we looked at the tenure of the supervisor. People who had been on the job less than 2 years had a 14 percentage point difference in turnover from the trained people versus the untrained people. When we can segment the data like this, we can say, what kind of recommendations should we make? This is nice, but, and this gets to something Hannah said too, you have to have a point of view. Presenting data is one thing. The other thing is interpreting it. Our recommendation coming out of this was, if you want to reduce turnover of supervisors, you should probably make sure your newest supervisors get to go to training. They were training some of the older supervisors, and of course that wasn't really affecting turnover that much. So they're using this to make decisions. We also looked at safety scores, and you can see that there was a difference in safety scores just for small plants. So now we say, how would you interpret this? And we interpret it by suggesting that large plants, it doesn't matter if the supervisor's trained as much because it might be so much else going on, but at a smaller plant, a supervisor can indeed affect safety. So we're asking these kinds of questions. It's just not presenting the data, but it's asking, so what? Coming up with your point of view, your perspective on this to give them things to think about to make decisions. And then finally looking at productivity, and you can see that here we're using a scatter plot and a trend line, and we use regressions and all sorts of things to compute all this. And at the end of the day, their question was, should we continue the program? And productivity went up, turnover went down. They said, absolutely. And they shifted and made sure that newer supervisors did get into the training sooner. So that's how we use data in the workplace, not just the data, but designing an observational study, doing statistical analysis, and presenting results to help organizations make decisions. Interestingly, 96% of learning leaders want to do this kind of work. Sadly, only 10% actually are. Why? This is good news for all of you because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to measure. They don't know what to measure. What should their KPIs be? They don't build measurement maps. They don't have sophisticated data analysts. They don't have people that know statistics. So they don't know what to do. And they're starting to ask that question. You've got 96% of learning leaders spending billions of dollars on training every year. And they need our help. They need our help to understand their data, to understand their programs, and to give them advice. So how the heck did I get here? I started off, I got a business degree at Central Michigan University with a minor in journalism. And my emphasis was in marketing with a heavy emphasis in accounting, which might sound not very much like a STEM background, but the accounting background was essential for me understanding business. And when you're working with data, the most important thing in my mind is that you need to have business acumen. What the heck am I looking at here? How does it matter to the organization, and how do I interpret it? If you have the opportunity not to get a degree in accounting, I'm not professing that, but to take a course or two in accounting so you understand how business keeps score, it will serve you well for the rest of your career. Even if you're going into laboratory research for cancer or something, knowing where the dollars come from to fund your research, being able to position your grant for request for funding in business terms will go a long way. Out of school, I did end up working for a computer company in the marketing area because I had a degree in marketing, and I found out that I stunk at sales. I was just not the salesperson. And I instead went into customer support. And that's where I really got this affinity for how computers and all of this help people in business. And I saw people struggling. And so I wanted to train them on how to better use their systems and their data and their reports to get information. So I ended up getting a master's degree from Wayne State, an MBA, again, in business, and used that to become a process re-engineer analyst. So this is where a lot of the cause and effect kind of thing came in for me, where if this, then this, and causal modeling really helped refine my logic and how I would think things through. And I became involved with the International Society for Performance Improvement, which is a professional association, obviously dedicated to human performance and improvement in the workplace, and went on to do some of this work with business impact analysis and causal modeling. Got my PhD, and now I speak. Last year, I went to India and ran a couple workshops there. A number of my organizational clients have won Learning and Practice Awards for showing business impact. And now I love to write articles about it from a business standpoint. I'm not writing in STEM magazines. I'm writing in training and learning magazines to elevate the thinking around learning and measuring business impact and learning amongst learning professionals. I did want to talk, and I know we're really tight on time here, but I wanted to think about this, finding your why. And Hannah did a nice job talking about her why and why we do what we do. We tend to start with our what, though. If somebody said, hey, Bonnie, what do you do? Oh, well, I conduct research and collect and analyze data, and I interpret results to support decision-making. That's what I do. How do I do it? Well, I discover what's blocking and enabling workplace performance. I look at the work, I look at the worker, I look at the workplace. But when it comes down to it, and if you want to be passionate about what you're doing, you have to know your why. Why do I get up in the morning? Is it to conduct research? Well, it's kind of fun, but why am I really doing it? Because I want to help people lead richer lives by enabling to do their best at work. And if by doing that, if that's my why, then I know how I do it, because I'm going to discover what's blocking their performance. They want to do a better job at work. And how do I figure out what's blocking their performance? I conduct the research. As you start into your careers, think about the why. And Simon Sinek is a great TED Talk guy, and he's got a book called Start With Why. And this is his golden circle. And when you know your why, it makes everything a lot easier, and it gives you the reason you're doing this. And it helps you think bigger than just, hey, I like to do research. Well, why do I like to do research? If I like to do research, I could have been a clinical drug trial person. But no, my why was about helping people do better at work. I have been working with a lot of men over the course of my career. My father was an original male chauvinist pig. We don't call them that anymore, but back in the previous century, we did talk about male chauvinist pigs. And I had to learn how to work with the guys. And I have just 3 pieces of advice for you as we think about breaking the glass ceiling. And there's a lot of glass breaking going on right now, even in politics. And the first thing is learn how to shake hands. First impressions really matter. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And if you shake somebody's hand like a limp fish with a bent wrist, they're forming an opinion of you, likely as a weak woman. I hate to say it, but you don't want to do that. Get with a friend, practice a nice, firm handshake. It matters. First impressions only happen once. The other thing is tone of voice. And again, this gets with the first impressions. I have seen some women new in role kind of have a high voice and end everything with kind of like a question, like they're not very sure. And they kind of da. I think we've all heard people like that. And guess what? You lose credibility. Even if you don't have the answer, practice speaking in a more commanding voice. It does matter. Again, first impressions matter. And another thing that helped me get along and make inroads working with a lot of men was understanding sports a little bit. If right now fantasy football is a really big thing, and I'm on 3 fantasy teams, and it's fun to be able to talk with coworkers and other people about fantasy football. When a guy knows that you care about something like that, suddenly you're friends, you're on the same parallel or the same path. So if you've not ever played fantasy football or any of the fantasy things, get with a bunch of girlfriends and do it. Learn together. Be silly. but you'll have something in common that you can talk about that will be respected across the people you're talking with, because it's kind of a level playing field there. Oh, and by the way, there's also a lot of data behind it. In closing, again, start with why. Simon Sinek, if you want to take a good look at something and figure out what your why might be, he does a great story of the difference between Apple and Microsoft and the why of the two different companies. You might find it fascinating just to listen to his TED Talk. Another great read is Douglas Hubbard, How to Measure Anything. Finding the Value of Intangibles in Business. This guy is an economist, and he brings an interesting mindset at how to get at data and the power of Monte Carlo simulations and so on. So if you guys really want to geek out, there's a book for you. 3 final thoughts. 1, be curious. In any STEM field, it's being curious that's going to drive you. Asking why. And if you take Albert Einstein's quote, that kind of makes sense. Wonder Woman even talked about it. Which do you hold? Which will hold greater rule over you, your fear or your curiosity? Let your curiosity win. You can make mistakes. You'll learn from it. Business acumen. We talked about that and the importance of that in communicating. And finally, finding your voice and your why, and being able to project it in a confident way, and knowing what you want to do. So this has been 25 plus years in the trenches, working with men, coming through, figuring out my role with data, how my passion for data can translate into a profitable career and a rewarding one. And I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you and wish you all well on your careers. My email is there on the bottom, and I know that you guys are anxious now to find out who the winners of the math competition are. So thank you for your interest in learning about both what Hannah and I do. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie, for your enlightening presentation. I completely agree. Big Bang Theory is an amazing show. My family and I, we would watch it every night until obviously it ended. All the seasons are done, but we still go and rewatch it. We love that show. But your speech has given us all confidence to take on a career in science and technology, as well as teaching us and educating us on how best to pursue them. So once again, thank you very, very much. I will now hand it over to the rest of my team for awards.
So first of all, I